partnership is crucial for both. Thank you very much.
Very much for coming today. Today we will talk about the construction of peace in the atmosphere of rehearsals for the Third World War. How do we describe the age we live in? Can we call it the age when evil has become commonplace? Can we say the governing with crisis is now a new form of governance, and that we live in the age of unpredictable leaders? Above all, we wish this conference to be recognized as a modest support to the efforts of those who strive for peace. For a last century, Kurds have been struggling for peace, freedom, justice, and have paid a big price. Our conference this morning, we will analyze the latest development in northern Kurdistan and Turkey and the new process that has been going on since October. We will have the opportunity to examine the reflection of the new process on Rojava. We will discuss the situation of Rojava, Kurdistan, and possible developments in Iran. In discussing the future of the region, we will try to analyze how prepared the Kurdish movements are for the opportunity and risks. Of course, we will draw attention to the contribution of national and regional dynamics, as well as international dynamics to the peace building. In the light of national, regional, and international experience, we will continue our efforts to promote an honorable peace. Dear guests, today we have a very important speaker. They will share our experience and regarding to us. Mr. Tuncer Bakirhan is a senior Kurdish politician and co-chair of the People's Equality and Democracy Party. Ezgi Başaran, she is a scholar of Middle Eastern and Turkish politics based in Oxford. Ferhad Hemmi is a journalist and researcher from Kobani. As many of you, and also myself, we know him from Rojava revolution, especially from Kobani. We have excellent professor here, Professor Dr. Abbas Wali. He's from Mahabat in the Kurdistan region of Rojava. To be honest, today we are going to listen our guest. When I talked to myself, I said, today's the star is our speaker. Now, with your permission, I'm going to give fellow to the Ezgi Başaran. Please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Osman Başkan. Can you hear me? Fine. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. So, I think Israel's recent attack on Iran must have revealed to some, especially within the Turkish opposition, the deeper motives behind Turkey's recent negotiations with the Kurdish movements. Those talks that culminated in the PKK's historic announcement of disarmament and disbandment, I think a monumental event in the 40-year conflict between the Turkish state and one of its most persistent armed adversary. I've covered the Kurdish conflict as a journalist and then as a scholar for the last, I think, 2 decades, and I wouldn't have dreamt that this day would come. And so I'm very hopeful, but also concerned hopeful, anxious hopeful. And I will try to get behind these emotions and tell you why most of the people are hopeful, but also anxious. This new process, which became public around November 2024, is unusual in form and character because it is led, at least in appearance, by Devlet Bahçeli, the ultra-nationalist kingmaker of Turkish politics. And obviously Öcalan, the founder of the PKK. That pairing alone should stop us in our tracks, because Bahçeli, who just last year was still calling Öcalan a baby killer, and now publicly praises him as the Kurdish leader, Kürt önderi, in the exact parlance of the movements. And he calls him wise, he pushes for dialogue. So people ask, what has changed in the life of Turkey, in the life of Devlet Bahçeli, or in the ultra-nationalist of Turkey, and which led to this about face? There are many layers, but the most immediate explanation, as I've said in the beginning, is the shifting security calculus in the Middle East since October 7th. The war in Gaza, the regional escalations, invasion of Lebanon, killing of Nasrallah, fall of Assad, invasion of Syria by Israel again, all of it forced Turkey's security and intelligence circles to reconsider their Kurdish equation. They reopened talks with Öcalan, not out of benevolence, obviously, but necessity, because Öcalan's long-held positions, his warnings about Israeli designs, his emphasis on disarming before it's too late, which actually back then, if you read enough Öcalan, you just had come across with him calling an end of armed conflict around 1993. And for the Turkish state, all of this began to sound less ideological digressions and more like strategy memos that could help both sides, he and the state, suddenly on the same page. Öcalan, before his call for the PKK's disarmament, had sent several letters, as you've followed, to the leaders of the movement in Europe, in Iran, in Syria. And yeah, one of them was to Muslim Abdi. And according to a couple of my sources, in that letter, Öcalan warned Abdi that those who failed to disarm would face external destruction, and pointed to what happened to Hezbollah and Hamas. A similar content was obviously sent to Kandil and to the leaders in diaspora. I believe Öcalan sees a narrow window to bring the Kurdish groups, PJAK in Iran, SDF in Syria, the PKK in Kandil, even parts of the KRG, into a political fold. He's also restated that like I said, the Kurdish statehood is a trap. That is what a recent leaked memo between him and the Dem Party representatives at the end of April revealed. So he argues that a more strategic path is to become central actors within existing states. That vision is actually deeply controversial in Kurdish nationalist circles and among diaspora elites of the Kurdish movement. And for the first time, Öcalan, we are witnessing Öcalan being openly and harshly criticized from within his government, within his own movement. And there's nothing surprising about this, because this is a monumental, like I said, moment, a pivotal moment. This is what happens at critical moments. Social movements fracture, armed organizations splinter. Some cadres will align with the new strategy, others will resist. But Öcalan's belief is that the only way forward is coordinated Kurdish dialogue across borders. Hence the first Kurdish Unity Conference in May, and a refusal to be drawn into Israel's regional designs. That is what I gather from Öcalan's messages. That leaked message from the Dem Party representatives is worth summarizing. He sees Israel as pursuing a deliberate strategy to turn Kurdish regions into war zones, what he calls Gazaification. He outlines a 5-phase plan led by Israel and United States. He says Gaza and Lebanon, Syria were the first, Iran and Turkey will be the next. Just bear in mind that this meeting was before Israel had attacked Iran. So it is interesting that someone imprisoned for the last 26 years on an island still able to shape and be so perceptive about the Middle East politics. And I think it speaks to Öcalan's long memory of the terrain, his decades in Syria and Lebanon, and obviously the fact that for years his only visitors have been Turkish security officials. Despite criticism from the diaspora, the heavyweights of the movement stand tall behind Öcalan's strategy. For example, Selahattin Demirtas released a letter after the Iran attack. His tone was urgent. He called for immediate legal guarantees to protect this process. Without them, he warned, the talks would be vulnerable to collapse. He condemned the crackdown on the main opposition of Turkey and voiced concern over those in the Kurdish nationalist camp who may be flirting with the idea of using the chaos to push for an Israeli alliance. So again, a senior PKK figure, Behzad, offered a parallel reading very recently. She declared that democracy in Diyarbakir, in Ahmed, is impossible without democracy in Istanbul. She identified Israel's attack on Iran as part of a broader project to redraw the region. Turkey, she warned, like Öcalan, is next. If the Kurdish issue is not resolved through political reform, catastrophe will follow. In her words, everyone must do their part for peace. So where does this whole thing leave us? In summary, I think there is a fragile but unmistakable consensus among Kurdish leaders in Turkey on several key points: that Israel is playing a strategic Game of Thrones, aiming to become the regional hegemon with a nuclear monopoly. That, contrary to the hopes of some Kurdish nationalists, this is not the moment to pursue a backing from Israel. Doing so would be detrimental to all Kurdish entities. That they agree with the Turkish state in identifying Israel as a real threat, and that the peace process is extremely vulnerable to external sabotage, internal dissent, and crucially to the whims of Erdogan. I think until now I haven't mentioned the elephant in the room, that is Turkey's omnipotent president. And that is because, partly because the public driver of this process is not, he doesn't want to be seen as the public driver of this process as he wanted back then in 2013. Because just let's remember what happened in 2013. As a politician, Erdogan lives and dies by the polls. He saw in 2015 that the process had not boosted AKP's vote share. On the contrary, it allowed the Kurdish party, back then HDP, to crash through the electoral threshold and become a kingmaker. When the rise of Kurdish autonomous entity in Rojava coincided with this, he quickly lost his appetite. The process collapsed triggered by still unsolved killing of two policemen in the southeast of Turkey. What followed, as you may remember, was a nightmare, full-blown guerrilla war, and a rapid slide into deeper authoritarianism. In my view, there are many threats to this current process. Most may come from outside, from the Middle East moving tectonics, but there are then dangers within the PKK and within the Turkish deep state. But most of all, there is Erdogan. What I fear most is Erdogan changing his mind, to be honest, losing interest. We have seen him do it. He has the power to shape the narrative, to reframe any misstep as necessary. Even after a blow, he can move on. But the question is, will he? Sadly, the answer depends on his own cost-benefit calculus. I mean, I've written a book on the 2013 peace process, and I ended that book with a train allegory. I wrote, as I write this, there's a Kurdish train leaving Syria and Turkey carrying a huge load of baggage, a load of despair, hate, anger, remorse, but also of love and hope for a better and more peaceful Middle East. I believe a Kurdish train is once again pulling away from the wreckage of war, this time with an even heavier cargo, the memory of betrayal, the weight of fractured alliances, the danger of new traps, but also the same stubborn hope. If this train derails now, it will not be because the Kurdish people lacked vision or courage. It will be because the region's powers chose fear over imagination and domination over peace. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As many of you know, Ms. Elham Ahmed was supposed to be with us at the conference today as well. However, she was unable to attend due to recent developments, but she is present with us today through her message. Now I am calling to share her message.
Dear distinguished guests, it is an honor to address this conference, and I begin by extending my heartfelt thanks to the organizers for putting together such a meaningful and timely event during a particular critical moment for our region. I must also express my sincere apologies for not being able to join you in person. Due to unavoidable circumstances, I am prevented from attending this important gathering. However, I hope this brief message will serve as a contribution to the valuable discussions taking place and a reflection on the importance of resolving the Kurdish question as a cornerstone for peace in the Middle East. We meet today against the backdrop of a deeply troubled Middle East, where wars of attrition continue, driven by regimes that cling to power and reject change. Iran today stands on the brink of crisis. Syria and other countries in this region have long suffered under similar conditions. At this pivotal point, I want to emphasize one fundamental truth. Resolving the Kurdish issue is key to resolving many of the region's broader conflicts and is essential for achieving lasting peace. That is why this conference is so significant. For over a century, regimes across the geography of Kurdistan have pursued authoritarian and repressive policies, not only against the Kurdish people, but against many other communities. These regimes, unwilling to embrace democratic transformation, are willing to risk the total destruction of their nations in order to retain absolute power. The Ba'ath regime in Syria, successive Turkish governments, and the Iranian regime have all followed the same playbook of denial, oppression, and forced assimilation. It is often said, and rightly so, that the Kurds are the largest stateless people in the world, a nation denied its basic rights, identity, and self-determination. Since the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement over 100 years ago, an agreement in which Britain played a key role, the Kurdish people have struggled for recognition. That agreement tore the Kurdish homeland apart, placing it under the control of a centralized states that have worked relentlessly to erase Kurdish identity. Yet, despite these policies of denial and assimilation, the Kurdish people have preserved their culture, language, and heritage. In Syria, which represents only a small part of the Kurdish homeland, we endured a systemic campaign of Arabization, the renaming of villages, suppression of cultural and religious practices, imposition of the so-called Arab belt along the borders with Iraq and Turkey, and the exclusion of Kurds from political life. Then came the Syrian revolution, and with it a new threat, ISIS. Kurdish existence was one of its primary targets. Yet, through the development of a self-defense system and the forging of multi-ethnic local alliances under the banner of the autonomous administration, we defeated ISIS, protecting not only ourselves, but global security as well. In that struggle, Kurdish women rose as symbols of resistance and resilience, claiming their rightful place in society. Together, we made history. The sacrifices made on this land by the Kurdish people shifted the course of humanity. But as we examine today's political landscape in Syria, we see the historical mistakes being repeated. The international community's attention has turned to the interim government in Damascus, while the sacrifices made by the Syrian democratic forces are increasingly being forgotten. Where are the constitutional guarantees for the Kurdish people? Where is the international support that once praised their fight against terrorism? What we need now is genuine international commitment to the legitimate demands of the Kurdish people and their partners in this democratic project. It is unacceptable for the interests of powerful states to override the rights of the entire peoples. If the Kurds are once again denied their rights since the Syria's constitution, then let us be clear, there will be no peace in this region. Everyone here knows of the historic step taken by the Kurdistan Workers' Party to dissolve itself in the pursuit of peace. Armed struggle was one of its methods in the quest for justice and equality in Turkey. But now, after 50 years of resistance, and thanks to an initiative launched by Mr. Abdullah Öcalan from his prison on İmralı Island, the armed struggle has ended. The path forward is legal and political, but for that to succeed, constitutional and legal guarantees are essential. Instead of embracing this historic opportunity, the Turkish state continues to deny Kurdish rights and to pursue policies of eradication. This is not only a missed opportunity, it is a dangerous path. We call on the international community to support Mr. Öcalan's peace initiative, whether through official diplomatic channels or legal mechanisms, and to push for Turkey's active engagement in a peaceful political process. Legal frameworks must be established to secure the rights and dignity of all peoples involved. In conclusion, allow me to offer the following proposals. 1, to establish a committee composed of parliamentarians, diplomats, and media professionals to monitor and support the political process in Syria. 2, to form a similar committee to follow up on the peace process in Turkey and to formally request a meeting with Mr. Abdullah Öcalan. And 3, to create a monitoring group to assess developments in the Iranian-Israeli conflict and to advocate for the Kurdish cause within that context as well. I thank you all once again for your commitment, your solidarity, and your belief in peace and justice. May peace prevail, and may the voice of the Kurdish people be heard. Thank you, İlham Ahmed.
I want to thank her for this vulnerable and meaningful message. Our feeling of solidarity will always be with Rojava. I hope that we will have the opportunity to listen her in person here as soon as possible. Now, if you allow me, let us proceed to focus further on the matter of Rojava. Mr. Hemmi, we are familiar with you through the legendary resistance of Kobani. Thank you for attending the conference with us today. If you give me a chance, today's policy towards Rojava one of the key factors behind its withdrawal from the peace process that lasted from 2013 2015 in Bakır Kurdistan in Turkey.
Right, yes.
This could also be described as a policy of anti-Kurdish hostility. The consequences of such a policy have been served, and ultimately, Turkey did not emerge victorious either. How do you see the reflection of Turkey Rojava policy on the field since October to today, from October and until now? Do you think Turkey will be able to return to good neighbor relations with Rojava? In short, what could be the reflection of the current process on the gain in Rojava? Now you have the floor. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. My sound is okay or clear? Clear, yeah?
Yeah.
Your question is very important. I'm gonna try to buy my paper.
Please.
Maybe I can answer what you said and what you. I thank you for everybody and for the invitations. It's a pleasure for me to be here. After the fall of the Assad regime, Islamist forces led by Ahmad al-Shara seized power in Damascus, establishing de facto government. In this chaos that followed, women, democratic forces, civil society, and ethnic religions minorities were left shocked and vulnerable. At the same time, Turkey exploited this instability in coordination with its loyal militias, so-called National Syrian Army, and backed by airstrikes, launched a rapid military assault on regions previously administered by the autonomous administration. Areas like Shahba and Munbij, occupying them with brutal human rights violation. And it didn't stop there. These forces armed not just with weapons, but with discourse of hatred and genocide, tearing to the Shrin Dam and Kobani, the symbol of Rojava resistance. When the threat of the total destruction loomed over our region, like Second Gaza, Mr. Abdullah Öcalan's call for peace and democratic society emerged as a bold and timely intervention. In the face of the hate and denial, even talk of genocide becoming normalized, Mr. Öcalan insists on dialogue. He insists on peace. His message cut through the walls of war and opened historic opportunity. You mentioned window opportunity. I said historic opportunity to transform escalation into political possibility and fear into hope. His initiative to open dialogue between Kurdish society and Turkish state had immediate impact on North and East Syria. It first halted the Turkish state aggression toward the autonomous administration and paved the way for Mazloum al-Abdi, commander of Syrian Democratic Forces, and Ahmad al-Shara, the de facto ruler in Damascus, to sign the historic March 10th agreement. For the first time, a document constitutionally recognized the right of Kurdish society. The term integration mentioned at the beginning of the agreement is key. It moves us behind policy of denial and assimilation. The agreement opens the door to what could be called democratic integrations, not assimilations, not denial. Democratic integrations, which is remain within the state framework while protecting the universal rights of society. Mr. Öcalan's role in leading this process is vital. This position should be supported with full convictions as the path toward mutual recognitions, coexistence, and the securing of Kurdish rights, not only in Turkey, but also in Syria. As you know, the Syrian conflict has become proxy war for years, which ultimately turned the country into failed state and crushed hope for democratic transitions. Today, with Hayat al-Tahrir al-Sham in controlling Damascus, there are in reality neither functioning state institution now, nor legal protection for society. We, as a Syrian, are now at a stage where the focus must be on rebuilding state institution and securing the rights of society. At this stage, three conflicting visions have emerged for the future of Syria. First, centralized Sunni Arab nationalist state backed by Turkey and Saudi Arabia. This vision aims for stability, repression and exclusion of ethnic and religious diversity. Second, a divided Syria, fractured along ethnic and sectarian lines. For example, Druze, Alawites, Kurds, Christians, Sunni, and so on. And supported, whether implicitly or explicitly, by Israel under the pretext of its national security. This vision is continuation of tactic divide and rule, and fuels deeper conflicts across the region. Third, democratic peace based on mutual recognition and political dialogue, an approach advanced by Mr. Öcalan and forming the foundation of negotiation between him and the Turkish state. Only this third vision offered the chance for lasting, meaningful, and democratic stability. So, where do we stand in all this as a North and East Syria? It's clear the path for peace and democratic society is the only way to break the cycle of violence. Violence that ignores all human, moral, and legal norms, as we see in the massacres against Alawites in Syria, the tragedy in Gaza, and the war between Israel and Iran now. This paradigm is not just a call for peace. It is a new roadmap to free societies from the centralized, disempowering control of the nation state, industrial and military-industrial complex, and new liberalism. It offers a real hope grounded in reason for democratic Middle East built on interactions, interconnections, and solidarity among its peoples. Despite some recent political and security progresses, there remains deep divide over what kind of peace is actually being taken, both regionally and within Syria. Many regional and global actors who follow nationalistic political agenda and economic profits reduce peace to narrow security objective, the restoration of order, which means peace ends all peace. This is evident in their diplomatic support for Ahmed al-Shara government, which is reinforcing authoritarian regime under fundamentalist Islamic banner, denying women's rights and suppressing basic freedoms. I think that autonomous administration should firmly stand behind Mr. Öcalan's visions of peace, one that balances state and society, guarantees universal rights, and empowers people through constitutional and local democracy. This is transformative, win-win situation that safeguards the interest of all. Against Damascus' centralized mentality, Raqqa, once the capital of ISIS, can now stand as a seat of democratic politics and interactive coexistence. This promising model could offer a foundation to build upon. So, what's the next? And how do we make these clashing paths to create peace in Syria? The March agreement between the autonomous administration of North and East Syria and the Damascus government, backed by international Turkish government and also local forces, provides strong foundation for just and honorable peace. But the challenge now is how to put it in practice.
Yeah.
That means building constitutional state and democratic society, one where local communities are empowered through freedom and communal democracy, while respecting regional sensitivities. The West, especially the United Kingdom and Turkey, bear major responsibility here. they must press the Shara government to abandon its authoritarian and exclusionary policies and to accelerate institutional and political reforms. If they do not, any agreements risk collapse.
Yeah.
Because there are no winners in war and no future in fear. In fact, the March agreement helps prevent possible military clash with Damascus government and reduce tensions with Turkish-backed groups in occupied areas. But most importantly, it opened the door for serious political talks with Damascus. After the Kurdish Unity Conference in Qamishli on April 26, the autonomous administration formed negotiating committees that are now in talks with Syrian government. Still, putting this agreement into actions faces big challenges because of deep disagreement and sensitive issues that are not yet solved. Here, I wanted to briefly talk about some challenges of the agreement. In reality, though the Damascus government has tried to make some surface level change to the state works, but it still holds on the centralized and authoritarian system. This is based on political Islam and continue to make legal and constitutional decisions alone, choosing certain technocratic selectively. This approach helps no one and stands in the way of peace and democratic unity. At the same time, the autonomous administration should reflect on its own experience, identifying shortcomings and keeping up with challenges of the important period. This means being more open politically across Syria and moving behind geographic and ethnic beside limits, which is we have to work politically across Syria. Ultimately, the more progress is made in peace process led by Mr. Abdullah Öcalan with Turkish state, the more positive its effect will be in Syria. At the same time, it's true in reverse. This process is a real source for hope for all peoples, even beyond national borders, and a historic chance to turn the suffering of the past into better future based on peace, mutual recognitions, justice, and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for hearing from you. And what is the primary strategic step that the state should take to be quiet, peace and freedom for future generations? Is there a difference between what the Turkish and the Kurdish side want from peace? يعني جي اشتيه ونو دولت يكتش فهم دكن تشتك ون جي اشتيه يبي دكن او تشتك دولت يبي دك يكتش تجلو. I would like to ask you with awareness that your burden is heavy. Do you have any expectation from third parties for the process to evolve into an honorable peace? What should be done and what should be avoided? Sayın Başkan, Mr. President, now the floor is yours. Kerem.
Bu bölümü sen çevir sonra Ezgi Hanım. Türkçe çeviri yapabiliyor musunuz?
Türkçeden yapamıyorum.
Merhaba, Ezgi Hemmi Slavdıkım. Ez bavermun başım. İro de konferansıda ez dikazım Fikri Ramani Dem Parti benim zaman. Nada sebrekim ezin me hemgara dikazım. Çünkü ez metin ekibi xunum. Nada bra mera konferansa me civin baş budu bejim. Türkçe sence?
I would like to this conference going to be very successful and thank you very much for all you coming. Now I am going to read my presentation as a text and thank you very much for your coming and for your passion as well. Thank you.
Aslında spontane konuşacaktım ama
He meant to speak spontaneously,
konuşmacı arkadaşları dinledikten sonra
But after I heard others speak,
partimizin düşüncelerini derli toplu bir şekilde ifade etmek için sabrınıza sığınarak hazırladığım metni okumak istiyorum sizlere.
I would like to deliver the speech so that I can deliver what our party means and thinks about this.
Eğer sorularınıza yanıt bulamazsanız okuduğum metinde sorularınıza da zaten
Afterwards,
açık olacağız.
If this speech does not answer your questions, you can ask me after this.
Teşekkür ediyorum. Değerli arkadaşlar, dünya sistemi ve uluslararası ilişkiler açısından oldukça hassas bir değişim döneminin içerisinden geçiyoruz. Yeni sistemi adlandırma konusunda çeşitli tartışmalar söz konusu. Özellikle çok kutupluluk kavramı üzerinde durulduğunu gördük. Lakin 7 Ekim'den bugüne yaşananlar ABD'nin hala en belirgin aktör olduğuna işaret etmektedir. Öte yandan bu baskın olma hali dünyanın yeni bir düzen arayışı içerisine girmiş olduğu gerçeğini değiştirmiş değil.
The world system and international relations are undergoing a very sensitive period of transformation. There has been much debate about how to name the new system. We have seen a focus on the concept of multipolarity. However, since October the 7th, it has become clearer than ever that the US remains at the center of unfolding events. On the other hand, this dominant position also signals that the world has entered a new order. The structure of the system is changing.
Üçüncü Dünya Savaşı'nı yıllardır ifade ediyoruz. Şimdilerde artık dünyadaki birçok kesim Üçüncü Dünya Savaşı'nı ciddi şekilde konuşmaya başladı. Ancak halihazırda Orta Doğu'da yürütülen savaş Üçüncü Dünya Savaşı'nın bir parçasıdır. Soğuk Savaş'ın hemen ardından Birinci Körfez Savaşı ile başlayan ve birbirinin üzerine gelen bir dizi gelişmenin güncel izdüşümleri olarak bu savaşı düşünebiliriz. Bunun en büyük göstergesi de Orta Doğu'ya yeni bir nizam verme amacı taşımasıdır. İkinci Dünya Savaşı'ndan sonra şekillenen Orta Doğu'yu dizayn etme hedefi vardır bu savaşlarda.
We're calling this beginning of a third world war. Many parts of the world now openly use this term. The Third World War has already begun in a serious and layered way. The developments in the Middle East are just one part of it. The war that began after the Cold War and has accelerated by building upon itself can be described as a multi-dimensional layered crisis. In this context, the war in the Middle East serves two key aims. One, to reshape the regional order and to redesign the Middle East that was shaped after the Second World War.
Kapitalist modernitenin dayandığı ulus devlet, endüstriyalizm ve kapitalizm üçlüsünün içine girdiği çoklu çıkmaz bu savaşın politik, ekonomik sebebidir. Neoliberalizm politikaların ürettiği sorunları çözmeye dönük yıllardır süren arayışlar bir çözüm üretememiş, sistematik bir kriz baş göstermiştir.
The crisis of the system lies in the political economic deadlock of capitalist modernity's trinity, the nation state, industrialism and capitalism. The long search for solutions to the problems caused by neoliberalism has failed to produce one. This is a systemic crisis.
Kapitalist modernite krizden çıkışın yolu olarak savaşı örgütlemektedir. Savaşla birlikte tıkanan sermaye birikimi yolları hem savunma endüstrisi üzerinden açılmak istenmekte, hem de savaşı yaygınlaştırarak enerji yolları inşa etmek ve böylelikle kapitalizme yeni bir soluk borusu takılmak istenmektedir. En nihayetinde bugün Gazze'den Tarhan'a, Kiev'den Şam'a kadar geniş bir coğrafyada süren savaşın ekonomik politik temelinde kapitalist modernitenin krizi bulunmaktadır.
In capitalist modernity, war has been organized as a way out of crisis. Alongside war, paths for capital accumulation such as the defense industry are also being kept open. Through war, they seek to seize energy routes and thereby plug capitalism into a new lifeline. Today, from Gaza to Tehran, from Kiev to Damascus, the wars waged across such a vast geography are rooted in the economic political crisis of capitalist modernity.
Böylesi bir dünya tablosunda Kürt meselesi nedir? Nasıl doğdu? 100 yılı aşkın bir meseleyi birkaç cümlede anlatmak gerçekten zor. Ama temel hatlarıyla şu şekilde izah edebilirim. Orta Doğu'da 50 milyona yakın Kürt yaşıyor. Kürt meselesi yaklaşık 15-20 milyon Kürt'ün yaşadığı Türkiye'de 100 yıldır süren bir temel sorundur. Sykes-Picot ile Orta Doğu'da sınırlar çizilirken hiçbir halk Kürtler gibi 4 ülke arasında bölüşülmedi. Sykes-Picot düzeni Orta Doğu'nun 4 ülkesine modern Kürt sorunu miras olarak bıraktı. 4 devletin tümü için Kürtlüğün inkarı kendi rejimlerinin kurucu anlayışı oldu. Irak, İran, Suriye ve Türkiye kendi aralarındaki çelişki ve gerilimlerde Kürt meselesinde dönem dönem ortaklaştılar. Gerilimlere rağmen Kürt meselesinde ortaklaştılar. Dönem dönem de Kürt meselesini birbirlerine karşı gerilim alanlarına çevirdiler. Bu miras 100 yıldır 4 ülkenin de Kürt sorununda çözümsüzlüğü esas alması nedeniyle Orta Doğu'daki temel gerilim alanını ortaya çıkardı. Bu ülkelerden biri de Türkiye'dir. Osmanlı'nın yıkılış sürecinde Kürtler ve Türkler Çanakkale'de birlikte savaştı. 1920 Meclisi'ni birlikte yönetti. 1921 Anayasası'nda Kürtlerin ademi merkeziyetçi esaslı hakları tanındı. 1923'te kurulan Türkiye Cumhuriyeti 1924 Anayasası'yla farklılıkları yok saydı. Kürtçe konuşmak, Kürt ismi taşımak yıllarca yasaktı. Kürt varlığı yıllarca inkar edildi. Bu politikalar tepki yarattı ve irli ufaklı 29 isyana neden oldu. 1984'te PKK silahlı mücadeleye başladı. O günden bu yana 10 binlerce insan yaşamını yitirdi. Defalarca ateşkes ve çözüm arayışları oldu. 2013'te barış süreci başladı ama 2015'te tekrar çatışma sürecine girildi. Bugün yeni bir barış fırsatı doğuyor. 2024 yılında Ekim ayı Türkiye'de başlayan çözüm sürecine girmeden önce objektifi Orta Doğu'daki manzaraya biraz çevirmek istiyorum. Çünkü Orta Doğu'daki son gelişmeleri anlamadan Türkiye'deki çözüm sürecini anlamak pek mümkün olmuyor.
What does the Kurdish issue mean in such a world? How did it emerge? Explaining a problem that is over 100 years old in a few lines is difficult. Still, we can summarize it this way. The Kurdish issue, which affects nearly 15 to 20 million Kurds in the Middle East, has remained unresolved for nearly a century. It is a central issue in Turkey and a broader regional problem. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, which drew the current borders of the Middle East, divided the Kurdish people across 4 different nations. This agreement left behind a legacy of the modern Kurdish problem, a problem of divided identity and statelessness across 4 countries. The denial of the Kurdish identity became a founding logic of nation-states in the region. Iraq, Iran, Syria and Turkey aligned at times in joint policies or tensions regarding the Kurdish issue. Over time, each country's Kurdish question became a mirror for the others. The resulting lack of resolution in any one country affected the entire region's approach. Among these, Turkey was the most central. During the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, Kurds and the Turks fought side by side at the Gallipoli. They governed together in the 1920 parliament. But in 1924, the Republic of Turkey removed all legal distinctions. Speaking Kurdish, expressing Kurdish identity, living as a Kurd, all were banned for decades. This denial policy caused backlash. The PKK's armed struggle began in 1984. Since then, thousands of lives have been lost. Peace efforts were attempted several times, including in 2013, but collapsed again in 2015. Today, a new process is emerging. The peace process that began in Turkey in October 2024 must be understood in light of the broader developments in the Middle East. One cannot make sense of the resolution process in Turkey without understanding the Middle Eastern dimension of the Kurdish issue.
Dünya sistemine dönük değişim arayışlarının en belirgin yansımaları adeta tüm çelişkilerin ortak kümesi Orta Doğu coğrafyasında yaşanan gelişmeler üzerinden takip edilmektedir. Bu yüzden halihazırda Orta Doğu'da yaşanan tüm olaylar hem küresel hem de bölgesel düzeydeki hegemonya mücadelelerinden ayrı düşünülemez.
Attempts to redesign the world system are being driven by crisis. These transformations are happening in a complex interplay of global, regional, and local dynamics. The conflicts in the Middle East are part of a global hegemonic struggle. They can't be seen separately from the contest between global powers.
7 Ekim İsrail-Hamas çatışması, 22 Ekim Sayın Bahçeli'nin açıklamaları, 27 Şubat Sayın Öcalan'ın Barış ve Demokratik Toplum çağrısı, 12 Mayıs PYK'nin kongre kararlarını açıklaması kritik tarihler dizilimi olarak önümüzde duruyor. Türkiye'nin hem iç siyasetinde hem de bölgesel konumlanmasında yaşanan köklü dönüşümün haritasını çiziyor bu tarihler. 7 Ekim'de patlak veren İsrail-Hamas savaşının yarattığı jeopolitik deprem sadece Gazze'yi değil tüm Orta Doğu'nun güç dengelerini alt üst etti. Türkiye'yi de bu yeni realite içinde pozisyon almaya zorladı. Bahçeli'nin 22 Ekim'de çıkışı bu bölgesel çalkantının Ankara'daki yansımalarının ilk işareti oldu. 27 Şubat'ta Sayın Öcalan'ın çağrısı tamamen rastlantı olmaktan çıktı. 12 Mayıs'ta kongre kararlarının duyurulmasıyla bu süreç tamamlandı. Bu süreç Türkiye'nin hem Orta Doğu'daki artan izolasyondan kurtulma hem de iç barış sürecinin yeniden canlandırma stratejisinin bütünlüklü parçaları olarak okunmalı. Çünkü değişen bölgesel dengeler eski paradigmaları sürdürmeyi imkansız hale getirirken yeni ittifaklar ve yeni çözüm arayışlarını zorunlu kılıyor. Dönüşüm bölge ve devlet dışı aktörler için ya zorunludur, dönüşen yol alır.
October 7th, Israel, Hamas, the start of the Hamas war. October 22nd, Bahçeli's announcement of the involvement. February 27th, Öcalan's call for disarmament and disbandment. And May the 12th, the PKK's declaration that they would abide by Öcalan's call. This chronology marks a radical shift in both Turkey's domestic politics and its regional positioning. The October 7th war between Israel and Hamas disrupted the balance of power in the region. It not only reshaped Gaza, but also forced Turkey into a new geopolitical reality. Bahçeli's statement on October 22nd was an early signal of how regional shocks were being absorbed in Ankara. Öcalan's call on February 27th was not coincidental. With the May 12th announcement of the Congress decision, PKK's Congress decisions, the new phase was completed. This timeline should be understood as a coherent effort by Turkey to break out of growing regional isolation and to reignite its domestic peace process. The shifting regional dynamics are rendering old paradigms unsustainable. New ones must take their place.
Üçüncü bölümü çıkaracağım. 4'te devam ediyorum. Bizce Orta Doğu'da çözüm yolu sadece emperyal müdahalelerin ya da bölgesel hegemonik arzuların kabulü ya da reddiyle sınırlı tutulamaz. 100 yıllık katı ulus devletçi yaklaşım yerine 3. yol yaklaşımının esas alınması gerektiğini düşünüyoruz. Bütün ulusların kendi farklılıklarını yaşayabileceği, demokratik ulus fikri bölgenin yıllarca yaşadığı etnik ve mezhepsel gerilimleri giderecektir. Aslında eski düzenin yıkıldığı, yeninin kurulamadığı bir denklem söz konusudur. Dolayısıyla yeni düzene dair fikirler her zamankinden daha fazla zemin bulma kapasitesine sahiptir. Orta Doğu'da kaosun ateşi büyürken Türkiye barışın meşalesini daha da yükseltmeli, hukuki ve siyasi sorumluluklarını gecikmeden hayata geçirmelidir. Zaman hem ülke için hem de bölgeyi su olup serinletme zamanıdır. Evet.
According to us, the resolution in the Middle East requires the rejection of the hegemonic borders. The mono state nation idea that has its roots in the last 100 years is not working, and we propose a third way approach. In that approach, we argue that all nations should live with their differences in a democratic nation idea, and that would ease the sectarian tensions within the region. The Middle East is going into a fire of chaos, and Turkey may ignite the peace in the Middle East.
Sayın Öcalan, Orta Doğu'nun karmaşık siyasi dokusunda barışın yol haritasını çizen stratejik bir aktördür. Kürt sorununun çözümünden bölgesel istikrara uzanan geniş perspektifiyle hareket etmektedir. Bu yönüyle Sayın Öcalan'ın barışın maestrosu olduğu gerçeği artık göz ardı edilmemelidir. Sadece Türkiye'nin iç barışına değil, Suriye'den Irak'a kadar uzanan coğrafyanın demokratik dönüşümüne de ışık tutmaktadır. İmralı'daki düşünsel üretimi, etnik ve mezhepsel çatışmaların yerini demokratik çoğulculuğun alabileceği demokratik ulus modelini ortaya koymaktadır. Bu model bölgedeki tüm halkların kendi kimliklerini yaşayabilecekleri yeni bir siyasi perspektif sunmaktadır. Öcalan'ın barış felsefesi Orta Doğu'nun 100 yıllık otoriter devlet geleneğine alternatif geliştirmektedir. Kadın özgürlüğü, ekolojik yaşam ve demokrasi üçgeninde yeni bir toplumsal sözleşme önermektedir. Bu nedenle hem Türkiye'nin demokratikleşme süreci hem de bölgenin barış ve istikrara kavuşması açısından Öcalan'ın düşüncelerinin hayata geçirilmesi kritik önemdedir. Bu durum tarihsel bir fırsat penceresi yaratmaktadır. Sayın Öcalan'ın bu tarihsel fırsat penceresinden Türkiye, bölge ve dünya ile özgür iletişimini sağlayacak uygun koşulların yaratılması da büyük önem taşımaktadır.
Mr. Öcalan's roadmap is not only for Turkey but for the wider Middle East. It is not only for Turkish domestic peace, but it will affect from Syria to Iraq, and it will lead a democratic transformation. His model of democratic nation can be applied in the Middle East, and I think Öcalan is the maestro, should be regarded as the maestro of peace and democracy. For this reason, both Turkey's democratization and the peace process, the stabilization of the peace process, is critical. This process has opened up a historic opportunity structure, and for this to move, for the wellness, for the sake of this process to move forward, Öcalan's communication with the region and the wider world, free communication with the wider world should be established.
Evet, sona doğru geldim. Açıkçası bu noktada İngiltere'nin özel bir konumu olduğunu belirtmek gerekiyor. Zira İngiltere Orta Doğu coğrafyasını ve kültürünü bir siyasal akıl çerçevesinde oldukça iyi bilen ve bunun üzerine en fazla mesai harcamış bir devlettir. Orta Doğu'da bir tür askeri güç olmaktansa devletler arası düzeyde sahip olduğu tarihsel birikimi ve bilgeliği geçmişin atalarına düşürmemesi için kullanılmalıdır. Kanımca Orta Doğu'daki tüm siyasal yapılanmaların iç demokratikleşme üzerinden kendi barışını tesis etmesinin ne kadar değerli olduğunu İngiltere'den daha iyi bilen az devlet vardır. Bu yüzden İngiltere'nin sorumluluk alabilen, bölge barışına katkı sunan bir aktör olması tüm halkların yararına olacaktır. Başta İngiltere olmak üzere Avrupa Birliği ülkelerinin çözüme katkı sunan bir pozisyonda olmasını temenni ediyoruz.
Frankly, at this point, it must be acknowledged that the UK has a special position in the Middle East. It is one of the countries that knows this region and its culture well and has invested the most political and diplomatic effort in it. The UK is not only a military force in the region, but also a country with strong historical knowledge and archives. In my view, the UK must use this deep well of experience to correct past mistakes and contribute to peace in the Middle East through democratization and inclusive governance. Therefore, the UK's ability to shoulder this responsibility will be valuable not only for the peoples of the region, but for global peace. We hope the UK, especially along with the EU, will take a role in contributing to a solution.
Dem Parti olarak yani bizler Orta Doğu siyasetini ve dinamiklerini en iyi bilen Türkiye'li güç olduğumuz konusunda bir şüphe yoktur. Bu kapsamda Orta Doğu'ya dair hem aktif güç hem de fikri siyasi olarak Orta Doğu'da yeni dönem için en güçlü öznelerden biriyiz. Bu güçlü konumuzu hem Türkiye'de sürdürdüğümüz büyük çapta mücadelemizle hem de uluslararası arenada yürüttüğümüz aktif diplomasi faaliyetleriyle pekiştiriyoruz. Özellikle İngiltere'deki çalışmalarımız bu stratejinin en somut örneğidir. Burada yalnızca hükümet düzeyinde değil, tüm siyasi partilerle, sendikalarla ve demokratik toplum kuruluşlarıyla daha fazla ortaklaşmak istiyoruz. Bu çok boyutlu diplomasi anlayışımız Orta Doğu'daki karmaşık sorunların çözümünde sadece devletler arası ilişkilerin yeterli olmadığını göstermektedir. Toplumsal dinamiklerin ve demokratik güçlerin de sürece dahil edilmesi gerektiğini ortaya koymaktadır. İngiltere'nin Orta Doğu konusundaki tarihsel birikimi bizim barış ve çözüm odaklı yaklaşımımızla buluştuğunda güçlü bir ortaklık zemini oluşturabilir. Hem Kürt sorunun çözümü hem de bölgesel istikrarın sağlanması için bu ortaklık önemlidir diyor. Hepinize saygılarımı iletiyorum sabrınız için.
Well, the esteemed speakers, I think, covered the ground admirably, talking about the peace process, its national and regional, and in certain ways international context, expressing their hopes and fears for the likely outcome in Turkey, in Rojava, and indeed for the Kurdish question in the wider context of the Middle East. I'm trying to, or I will try here in this very brief presentation, because time is overrun and I have to be brief. I would like to focus on aspects of it which were not covered in this presentations, and in a sense to look at a little bit critically on the obstacles to the peace process, both on the Kurdish side and also on the Turkish side. As Ezgi Başaran rightly pointed out, the peace process in Turkey has a longer history, and the conditions which were expressed or explained in Mr. Öcalan's letter have a longer history. As a matter of fact, when I met Mr. Öcalan in December 1998 in Rome, the subject of our discussion was exactly this issue. And in that discussion, Mr. Öcalan very, very clearly said, and this was a discussion which lasted for 5 hours we had there. And he very clearly said, basically said that, look, the armed struggle is in a dead end. And he said, in a dead end. It has entered a dead end. Neither the Turks, the Turkish state, nor the Kurdish movement, neither of us are going to prevail. This is a war which is not going to have a winner. Therefore, we must try to find a way of getting out of this deadlock.
Yeah.
You see, that was basically the discussion, and that was in December 1998 when he was in Italy. All right, and I was, rather was surprised and also, in a way, amused that when I read his letter to his party and to the, if you like, the leadership of his party in Kandil Mountains, I saw the similar issues are coming up. But this time, he's basically saying that the geopolitical conditions in the region have fundamentally changed. The ideological processes and settings have fundamentally changed. As a result of this, the strategy of armed struggle, which was adopted in 1984, has lost the conditions of its possibility. That was the fundamental issue that you get that. And I totally agree with that. And by the way, I also want to mention one important factor. When I had discussion with him, I told him that would the PKK have ever, resorted to arms, an armed struggle, if there was not 1980 or 81 coup d'etat in Turkey? He thought about it and said, I doubt it. You see, he said, I doubt it. In a sense that I want to say that it was not a matter of choice. It was not a matter of following an ideological lead after a fashion that, to go for armed struggle. But armed struggle was dictated by the conditions in Turkish politics. That was fundamentally the issue which came across. Now, Mr. Öcalan in the letter talks about the impossibility, or rather better say the undesirability of continuing the war. I mean, if you talk to leadership of the PKK in the mountains, they will tell you that we agree with it. We can continue for another 20 years. But whether this 20 years is going to get us anywhere or is going to get the Turkish state anywhere, we have serious doubts about it. So this is fundamentally the issue. But here, I think, after this letter, we have two narratives and two positions in Turkey. One is the narrative and position of the state, which argues for a Turkey without terror, you see. And then there is a Kurdish narrative and Kurdish position, which basically says that a democratic solution for Kurdish question and inside and in the context of a democratic republic in Turkey. Yeah. These two issues are very different, and they have very different conditions of possibility. in a sense, when I look at myself, I look at the Kurdish issue now, and the way that this peace process has brought about, what is brought about, I basically look at the peace process in Turkey as a democratic challenge of authoritarian limits of Turkish politics. This is what I fundamentally see this issue. Democratic a challenge of the authoritarian limits of Turkish politics. That is what fundamentally it is. So for Kurds, it is not a struggle for a Turkey without a terror. It's a struggle for the solution, democratic solution of the Kurdish question, and also as a means, both, there is a double side to that. One side of it, the resolution of Kurdish question, and another side of it is being a means, instrument for opening up the political process in Turkey so that more than, all the opposition, just Kurdish political parties, Kurdish forces being one of them, enter this political process and take part in democratic politics. But democratic politics, as we know, it requires juridical legal boundaries, and juridical legal boundaries are always set in the constitution of the state. Now, can we really talk about democratic game in Turkey within the boundaries, juridico-political boundaries of the present constitution, or the way that the constitutional change in Turkey has been or being envisaged? Now, this is a question that I think is a strategic issue which we have to deal with in Turkey. Coming back to two narratives is that on the Kurdish side, we have to make a fundamental difference between accepting the end of arms struggle and laying down arms. These are two different things for Kurds. Accepting the end of arms struggle is not laying down arms. These are two different things. And laying down arms for Kurds is the end result and consequence of a democratic process of negotiation. And if this negotiation succeeds, by all means, let's say farewell to the arms and surrender our arms. But for the Turkish state, the situation is other way around. For the Turkish state, laying down arms is the precondition for negotiation. These two sides are very, very much apart here. I think what makes this situation, it is obviously in politics, is not a strange thing to be miles apart. And in fact, it is always possible to have negotiations, possible to, if you like, make concessions, get concessions, and so on. So important thing is actually for this process of negotiation at present to start. And so far, it has not started. This is one important issue. Now, what is here is that, from my point of view, is missing, is rather not taking into account changes that Turkish politics has undergone since July 15th of 2016, the military coup. We are dealing with a very different Turkey now than before July 2016. And this different Turkey is the setting for these negotiations. So we have to take that into consideration, right? What is very surprising, if we compare and contrast the present peace process or initiative to start peace process in Turkey now, in last February, and to 2013. In 2013, I was there witnessing, I was teaching in the university there, and I witnessed it. It was a relatively open democratic process. It was being discussed, there were seminars, there were meetings, interviews, debates. It was going on this issue. The students were involved, people in all walks of life were involved, politicians were involved. The issue was being hotly and very engagingly debated. This time round, there is a silence. There is a silence. There is no democratic debate on this issue. And for this, I am not just blaming the Turkish state, but I am also blaming the Kurdish movement. Kurdish movement has so far made no significant, plausible, if you like, direct effort for opening up this political process, this democratic process. And as a result of it, we see this silence has helped, from my point of view, it is helping more authoritarian politics than its democratic challenger or democratic alternative. For that matter, I think it is a strategic issue for the Kurdish question now to put on the agenda the opening up of democratic process in Turkey. That is more important than the fate of the leader, I'm sorry to say. That is more important than the ideology of the organization. That is the vital issue. That this issue, if it is fundamental issue of democratic politics in Turkey or a future democracy in Turkey, this has to be widely debated. There has to be forces of opposition, have to be directly and openly engaged in this debate. I think so far this has not happened, and this has helped this issue of two narratives to continue, and going apart and apart. Yesterday, again, as Ezgi remarked, that there was a very important interview by Başaran. And it was a very long interview. If you cut it down, all of it, it will come, insofar as Turkey is concerned, it will come to one fundamental issue. And that fundamental issue is this, that peace process is being forced out of its path. It is being diverted from its past. And this, what is important is this, that this, if you like, this closure, this discursive closure on democratic debate, this situation that has been brought about in Turkey after this PYJ, after the initiative, this is helping this situation of the peace, if you like, initiative or peace process hasn't started. Let's say the plan, if you like, the desire, the initiative for peace, which has been declared. This is being diverted from its direct, if you like, role, and it is likely that it may not meet its intended objectives. Now, this is an important issue here, which Başaran here says that now that the situation has come to this, people must move in and take over. I think this is maybe a political party way of saying it. Thank you. a political party way of saying it, that the democratic process has to be opened and democratic process has to be kept, and it should be enriched. I think here the issue is here that Kurds have agreed, the Kurdish movement has agreed to this eventuality, that the strategy of armed struggle is dead for once for all. That is in this. But I am saying, and I am really sounding this alarm, that there are always a condition for its revival. There are always conditions for its revival. And these conditions very much depend on the attitude of Turkish state. To what extent Turkish state is going to genuinely embrace the peace process, and what is going to be done. I think there are a lot to be said about this. I think fundamental issue is now opening up the political process, allowing a genuine, rich, multifaceted, democratic discourse to proliferate and continue to develop in Turkey. Why I am saying that? This is the only way to keep the spirit of democracy in this process alive. And this is the fundamental objective. I think neither the ideology nor the leader are as important as this movement itself. And the movement can only thrive and go forward in a democratic condition. And that is the essential question at present in Turkey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you so much.